Vivarium stars Jesse Eisenberg and Imogen Poots and goes over the story of a young American couple trying to tour a new house they want to buy with what seems to be a realtor, but as suspicions of the house and the realtor rise up, they realize they are trapped in isolation in this neighborhood as they can't find a way out. Before I even start reviewing this movie, I just want to disclaim this. I don't hate this movie, one, and two, the concept and general horrifying aspect of this movie was really entertaining for me. I like this concept so much. I honestly want them to remake this movie so badly with the same concept, but what holds this movie back so much for me is the general execution with this amazing concept that they did. First off, the way that this movie is directed, I hate so much. Take Midsommar, for example, what Ari Aster did for that. He used the atmospheric scenery of the whole place in Sweden they were in, and it made it such a beautiful movie. There was so much potential for great cinematography with this movie that it breaks my heart for how stale and just shitty it is, really. There's so many close-ups of Jesse Eisenberg's face eating food, like we really needed to see that, as well as Imogen Poots eating. It's like, you could have conveyed their emotions with what the problem's going on a lot better than having a close-up zoom-up of Jesse Eisenberg's beautiful face. I did not need that whatsoever, though. What also is a massive flaw with this movie is that it just doesn't know what it wants to be. Does it want to be a horrifying sci-fi going over what these creatures are? Does it want to be a movie about what aliens could be? Does it want to be a movie going over the horrors of isolation? Does it want to be a movie about how you can't taste food? What does this movie want to be? I don't understand what it wants to be. It takes so many different subplots and so many different sub things that yes are scary on their own when they're executed well and when they're the main topic, but they try to get all these different elements on all these different horrifying topics, squeeze it into one ball of what they thought would be horror, and it doesn't come out well. Now, the main horrifying aspect of this movie is that they're in isolation. They are away from the world, and they are slowly going mentally insane. Now, this is a movie we've seen before, but I'm not even going to get into that. I'm just going to say this. That aspect of this movie I thought was handled pretty solidly. I generally bought into Jesse Eisenberg and Imogen Poots being two psychologically just messed up people that were going mentally insane. I bought into that. They did that well with this movie. But what they didn't do well was the sci-fi aspect of this movie. Because yes, this movie does have some sci-fi elements to it. They just didn't go full-fledged with it. It felt like it was in the background between the other aspect of this movie. Now, what they should have done is either kept that horrifying aspect without the sci-fi elements and just go over them being isolated and them slowly like going towards their fate, or they go full-fledged sci-fi and explore these creatures. I think they could have made an entire show just based off this movie because there's so many interesting things that were just not explained totally well in the movie that I just wished that were explained better. So after watching this movie, I decided to kind of do some research based off this movie because I was planning on doing a review. I generally get some background research done, and I found some interviews with the director talking about this movie, and he has stated, you can look this shit up, that he does not know what this movie really is. He didn't have a clear ending in mind. So he ends this movie in a way that, first of all, you're confused about everything that just happened in terms of the sci-fi aspect of this movie. You're like, what the hell is going on? You don't know what this is. You don't know what these creatures are, which, yes, could be scary, but the execution of them being scary wasn't handled properly, in my opinion. I don't think they were compelling enough to be scary in this movie. I thought it was rushed. I just didn't think it was scary, to be honest. And the movie ends in a way that we're just supposed to interpret what this thing is, but we really don't even know because it wasn't explained. There wasn't explanations towards anything. We're just supposed to make it up in our imagination. And I don't think a movie doing that is doing it right. See, I respect movies that end with making you come up with the interpretation. In my opinion, the movies that end like that, I think, are the classics. I think those are the movies that generally are talked about for years and years to come. But what this movie did is it ended like that, but instead of questioning the ending of this movie, I was questioning what this movie could have been. I was questioning how good this movie could have been rather than the ending, because I was just like, I'm never going to come up with a liable explanation of what this is and why it ended like this. I'm never going to come up with that. So I'm just going to think about something else, because this movie just doesn't go over any possible outcomes for what this is. It just ignores it, and we're just supposed to deal with it, and I don't like that. I think they should have. First of all, this movie's really short. if you're going to take all these different horrifying aspects and clump them into a movie, at least to make it long enough that you can explore them a little bit. That would have, I think, made the movie better. I also think it would have made it worse, because this movie is short, and there's a segment in the second act of this movie that made this movie drag so much for me. It made it drag so much so that I left the room. Usually when I leave and I go to do something, I pause the movie, but I left and forgot to pause it because I just didn't care. I just didn't care. And then it ends in a way that it completely resets this whole plot and this whole plot line. I'm just like, why would you even do this? Why would you waste 20 minutes of this movie going over something? It's going this way. I'm like, all right, I can maybe buy it. It's boring, but it might have an interesting ending. They completely wipe it away. And then it goes right back to the start. It's like you could literally not watch 30 minutes of this movie and miss nothing. You would miss nothing in terms of character development, character traits, and in terms of what happens in the story. You would miss nothing. It's just tacked on. It doesn't feel needed. It just weighs this movie down even more. Now, like I said, the concept of this movie is really interesting to me, and I think there's two ways they could have made this movie great. One, go full-fledged with the sci-fi aspect of this movie and just explore these things and what these things do and what they are, and just explain them. Almost like Prometheus did with the Alien trilogy and just series. Do something like that. Explore this and have Jesse Eisenberg and Morton Poots kind of not in the background, but not the central story. That's one way. Just go full balls, bonkers, sci-fi, creepy imagery. I think this movie could have went that way. Next, take the sci-fi aspect out and explore the true horrors of being in isolation. The true horrors and the true mental state you would be in going through this. We didn't need the sci-fi aspect. I actually think the sci-fi aspect wasn't interesting in this movie because it doesn't explore it. Like I've said a million times, it doesn't explore it well enough to make me care. But what I did care about was these two characters in isolation. I completely bought it. I bought them as two crazy people. I wanted to see what their fate was going to be. And when I find out what their fate was, I was satisfied with it. I thought that how this movie ended, in terms of not how you're supposed to come up with an interpretation, but the ending of what happens to the two characters. I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to say what happens. I thought this movie had some major ass balls for the way it ended, and I respected that. I respected that this movie didn't end in a way most movies end today. I just seriously wish that this movie took one of 10,000 subject matters they had in mind and just truly explored the horrors of that subject matter, because I think the subject matters in this movie, all of the ones that are in it, could be horrifying, and I just wish they explored it more. And yeah, I just wish they did more with this movie than they actually did. I think they kind of they wasted so much potential that this movie had. Now, I hate trashing movies so much, especially horror movies, because generally speaking, especially indie horror movies, I want them to succeed so badly. I love the way horror is going today. I love what A24 specifically is doing with horror, giving these no-name directors shots to perpetuate their horrifying thought and their horrifying script, and giving them the money and the potential to make them great horror movies. And now we have movies like The Babadook and Hereditary, which are two of the greatest horror movies I've ever seen, and even Midsommar, which is by the same guy that did Hereditary. I love the way horror is going today, and I just hope this is one of few horror movies I want to be remade and want them to actually execute it and want them to go truly into the horrifying aspects of either the sci-fi or the isolation. That's all I wanted with this movie. At the end of the day, this is just a poorly executed horror movie with a really interesting and propelling concept, with some creepy imagery and some creepy moments in the movie that, instead of making me think about those moments, I'm only thinking about what this movie could have been. I'm going to give Vivarium a C-. Like I said, this movie has one of the most interesting scripts and one of the most interesting concepts I've ever seen in a horror movie, and that's the only reason this movie has a positive grade. As if this movie didn't have all that and those interesting just plot lines in this movie, this would maybe be an F movie for me based off how it's executed. I really appreciate all the support I've been getting, guys. I truly appreciate all the comics, all the constructive criticism I've been getting, all the positive stuff I've been getting. I really appreciate you guys coming in and watching this channel. It just motivates me to want to keep moving forward. and I just love making these videos for you. So make sure if you guys enjoyed this video, please consider clicking that subscribe button and leave this video a like. And as always, keep watching movies.